creationism is like dumb, right?
Yeah, I think they're all equally dumb. I think anybody listening to, I don't know, a story about the world coming from an ostrich egg and whatever, they'd be like, wow, like you can think it's an interesting story, a pretty story, kind of like Rapunzel's a cool, interesting story, but nobody ever had hair that long, and somebody climbed up it and saved them, and they ran away. So I think all stories like that are just equally wrong.
Okay, so I heard you arguing about the Big Bang earlier with the earlier guest. My question is, how can the Big Bang be logically congruent with the way that you believe that the world works? Like, how does the Big Bang make sense to you based on your own perception, right? How do infinite things work in your mind? How does that concept even work?
So in terms of the scope of the universe literally being infinite, that doesn't make any sense to me. Um, but that doesn't really have anything to do with how I look at things. So I'm not 100% sure what to tell you. I think the Big Bang as a scientific body of work works with my worldview because I think that the scientific method is probably the best tool we can use to figure out things about the natural world. So I've never seen an atom, and nobody ever will, but we have a very, very, very robust body of science, and there are experiments that even an ordinary person can do to sort of confirm the idea of atoms, like the properties they have and things like that. All kinds of things which I don't know how to do the research myself or whatever. If I read the technical papers, my eyes would gloss over. But the science that has discovered the Big Bang is the exact same kind of science that made the cell phones we're talking to each other on possible, that makes medicine work, that tells us about, I don't know, just whatever in our lives. And so it's consistent with my worldview in that respect.
That's super interesting because do you follow Occam's razor when referring to logical things like whatever has the easiest explanation is probably true, right? Because that's part of the scientific
Um,
method.
yeah, well, it's not, I mean, parsimony is, so what parsimony does, and Occam's razor is very slightly different than what you said, and I always forget what the exact, like, it's not a super big deal, but what Occam really said is like don't multiply beyond necessity. And so what we commonly take that to mean is the explanation that has the fewest number of underlying assumptions is most likely to be true. But that's not always the case. It's just sort of, it's kind of almost like, it's just like a statistical way of reasoning. Like it's more likely to be true if you don't have to come up with all these convoluted things that like make it work or whatever. But there are, I don't know. I wish I had a scientist up there. They could maybe give a good example. I can't think of one off the top of my head. But there are, it the point is, just because something is complicated doesn't make it false, or even not even necessarily more likely to be false. It's very, very, very much context dependent.
The thing is that you have to understand from my worldview of creationism, and I do not believe that the world was created 6,000 years ago. I think that's by loons who don't understand science at all, right? In order to create the universe, there needs to be, I'm sure you've heard this argument to death, but the unmoved mover, there has to be a point of which something is eternal in order to create something that can be infinite in the first place. You know, there has to be a space for something to be in for that space to exist. So there has to be something eternal. And to me, that is God. And the only thing, if God created the universe, then by that logic, he created Earth, which would make the creationist worldview correct, in my opinion. Not that the world was made 6,000 years ago, but rather that God made all things and all things true through that type of unmoved mover fallacy. There has to be something
Right.
before the Big Bang
Fallacy.
in order to cause it.
So I don't think there has to be, because like, for example, like black holes exist. We can agree on that, right?
Yeah, we can agree that black holes exist.
So when you get to a black hole, I don't know if you know this, but like there's time dilation that happens. Time starts to move slower for you, but for outside observers, like, well, how do I say this? Time actually kind of moves faster for you. Sorry, compared with outside observers. But once you cross into the black hole, then the laws of physics completely break down, and our concept of space time or whatever just really doesn't work. The equations can't describe what's going on. So inside of that, inside of the boundary of the black hole there, time as we understand it may be completely different, or maybe it shuts off or something like that. I don't exactly know. But we don't think that black holes are like miraculous things, or that inside the black hole you're not in the universe anymore, or anything like that. Now, the universe, before cosmic inflation started with the Big Bang, the universe was, everything was crammed together much more closely. So I think of it kind of like a black hole in a way. And physicists know, they understand that our current laws of physics break down, and they don't really describe what was going on there from a perspective of space or space-time or time, right? But that doesn't mean that the universe, like we run the clock backwards and we cram everything together. And at that point before inflation, we have a not universe that needs to be ushered into existence. We still have a universe. It's just in a very odd state, something that we currently don't have a way of like describing. But it's not nothing. So the idea that a God needs to be there to make it start to do things, I think is just kind of fallacious, because it kind of requires you to think that there wasn't a universe and then there was. But I think this is also a very old argument, and people like Aquinas gave it because they had an Aristotelian view of physics, and Newton proved that that's not at all how things work. You don't have to have a first mover, which itself isn't moved by anything. That's not how physics works. In reality, every single action that propagates, there's an equal and opposite reaction, for example. So something can't do something and be unaffected by it. And like the counter is going to be, well, yeah, but God is different. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I get that, but we're only making this argument in the first place because we're imagining that the way things can work is that there's an unmoved mover, because we were very scientifically ignorant back then. Whereas today, we know that's not the case. And I just think if science had somehow been invented before religion, nobody would ever have come up with an argument like that, because there'd be no reason for it.
I disagree. I think people would come to the conclusion of religion no matter when science was created, because it's just that's the reason why
I only said that specific argument. I didn't say there wouldn't be religion.
I get it, but like that's the reason I brought up Occam's razor earlier. It's just that your worldview of the universe and how it was created requires so many more assumptions
No,
than the idea that there is just something out there that is eternal.
no, because sorry, but that's not the case, because you and I aren't imagining two different, as far as the natural world goes, I don't think you and I are imagining that the natural world itself is any different. You're adding God. So you've actually thrown in a completely new assumption, and the idea of just saying God, it's a singular idea, but God is the most complex thing imaginable. In fact, it's so complex that it's not even imaginable. So God is not a how do I say this? Does not solve Occam's razor, or it's not a good placeholder. how do I say this? God is not parsimonious. That's the only way I can think of saying it. Just because you can say it, just because you have a 3-letter word doesn't mean that it's actually simple.
Well, it kind of depends on what do you think God is, because God to me is the universe within itself, right? Because God, in order to fit the definition of the God, especially the Christian God, he has to have all the properties of the universe and then more, right? So it's not adding something to the that's not adding something to the claim. It's just basically saying that God is a being who created everything before and after, like a being outside of time and creation, because that's the only way that we can logically think that things come into existence. Without it, there is no singular point. Like again, I'd have to hear an argument that convinces me that somehow the universe was just created miraculously in just this one time. I'm sure you heard of the fine-tuning argument, where this
That's fine-tuning argument is horrible.
well, listen, I don't believe in the fine-tuning argument either, but if we're going to talk about logic, if we're going to talk about probability, the fine-tuning argument basically proves that this universe is statistically impossible to create, but it is.
Well,
And it's
I,
not,
So
I don't think it does that, but before Future Nightmares started, really about like 2 minutes ago, it pretty much just sounded like you said the universe is God. And so then you're not saying anything different than me saying the universe is uncreated. It didn't create itself. It has just always existed. And then it evolved into a state where we have the Big Bang and everything that's happened since then or whatever. But Future, go ahead.
So, are you talking about an ex nihilo creator, Dort? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't know what that is. That flew right over my head.
It's a mind that created the universe prior to all that we have.
Yes,
Okay.
I believe in that.
So, I have a simple question for you, and this is an inductive argument. So, how did this creator ex nihilo, prior to all things except for itself exist, furnish its mental content?
It always existed.
It always existed?
Yeah.
How do you know that?
For anything to create anything that is like our universe, it would have to always exist outside of
So the
space.
defeater to my argument as an inductive argument would be to give me an experience in where you did not know something or you furnish your mental content without anything exterior of yourself.
We do that all the time.
Yeah, name one.
Time.
No, time is not something that's something that you experience. That's external of
No,
yourself.
time
Yes,
is
it
not
is.
an experience; it's a phenomenon. And
It-
also, time is just based off of our perception, right? Time
Yeah,
is only
that's
based off
your
of our
perception
perception.
is your experience, Dort.
No, because
That's
the
part of
way
your
that
sense
time
data.
works, if we did not have the human consciousness in order to compartmentalize time, it would all happen at the same time and never ever happened in the first
That-
place.
this-
That's how time works.
Dort, I think in a simpler way, Future's trying to ask you if God's mind, there was a point where there was nothing except God's mind. How did God conceptualize and create and know things about the universe this God would create when there is absolutely nothing that exists?
Because he always existed. He's eternal. He's basically
Yeah, but the universe didn't.
That doesn't
Yeah, that's
answer the
fine.
question.
He can exist outside of the universe. He can exist
Dort.
before and after it.
How did he
Dort,
conceptualize a universe if universes don't exist?
Well, he made it because he's eternal.
That's special pleading.
You're not,
So,
well, it's not answering
anyway.
the question either.
Well, it's begging the question of special pleading. But Dort, I'm going to give you a hypothetical here. So this hypothetical is me sticking you in a dark room. Let's say I'm a kidnapper and I kidnapped you as a child. And I stuck you in a dark room, and this is a sick experiment that I'm starting. If you're sitting in this dark room with nothing around you, you only see a dark room, you could feel the walls, that's the only experience that you have exterior of yourself. Could you know what a burrito is and want a burrito?
You couldn't particularly know what a burrito is.
Could you desire a burrito if you do not know what a burrito is?
Well, that's kind of trapping me into a thing of the human mind, because the human mind is based off an experience, right? But the thing is that if something is eternal, right? If something is eternal,
Well,
that
again,
means
this
that,
is an inductive argument. This is
wait,
based off
let me
your
finish. Let me finish. If something is
I'll
eternal,
let you finish, and then I'll say the
right?
same thing.
That's fine. If something is eternal, it can have experiences that it logically couldn't have had because it's always have existed. An eternal being isn't trapped in one moment like I am in a dark room, because you have to think of it as me. It would be me in a dark room, me out before you put me in there, and if there was a way for me to get out, it would also be me outside of the room at the same time. It's
Yeah,
eternal.
you keep making this argument deductive. I'm talking about an inductive argument. Do you know what an inductive argument is?
Please explain to me, because
An inductive argument is based off of your experience.
okay, so I cannot base something eternal off of my experience,
But
because
then
I'm
what's
not
your
eternal.
rationality for knowing how God is eternal and how it furnishes mental content?
Because something eternal has to exist in order to
Yeah, but I'm
create
asking
the
you
universe.
your epistemology of how you know that.
The reason I know that is, okay, do you agree that everything came from something? That everything in your experience came from something else?
Yeah.
Okay, that's my experience that allows me to think that, because everything that I have
Yeah,
experienced
but you would have
comes
to
from
give me
something
an
else.
experience of something that is omniscient and knows everything.
Okay, so if I create my own story, I would know everything about that story. Therefore, I'm omniscient about the story.
Yeah, but that still goes back to the argument. In order to create that story, you're using things that are external to yourself to create that story.
How am I using things external to myself? I'm just using my own mind, my own thought.
Yeah, and
And I'm
that's
not eternal.
from your mental content. That furnishing of your mental content is from things that are exterior of yourself of what you've experienced.
Okay, so you're telling me someone in a dark room with only four walls cannot create a story? Because I'm
It
telling
would
you
not
that.
be able to create a story with things that exterior of itself. It would not be able to create concepts because the only experience that they would have is a dark room.
You're
They
right.
wouldn't have an imagination.
To me, I imagine this like, look, could you construct some arguments, or just like, could you figure out what you could say to a blind person to make them actually see the color red in their conscious?
Yes, exactly.
And I don't think that that's possible
Yeah,
at
well,
all. So how is this God making a universe exist when there are literally zero concepts this God can pull upon to do anything?
Because he is eternal. I mean,
But that doesn't matter, because the universe isn't eternal. So God can't look into this future universe and be like, okay, this is the universe I want to make, and then he makes it. But that just completely betrays everything, because then God's pulling on the universe to create a universe, which is like a reverse grandfather paradox in a weird kind of way.
But the thing is that he's not bound to one single point. He is every single point at every single time. Therefore, he can pull from his experiences from the future and then use it in the past to create the future.
But then he's not creating it.
This is just begging the question.
How is that begging the question?
Well, it tells us nothing about God's ability to create a universe, because you're just saying God has access to the future, and in that future there's a universe. So he's using the future of the universe to create the universe. Like I said, that's like
he's eternal.
Yeah, but that makes absolutely no sense.
How does that not make sense? That makes sense. I mean, they do it in
Okay.
Back to the Future. That's how it works.
Well,
It
that's
makes sense.
fiction, but how do I... To me, this is so obvious, but now I'm struggling to figure out a way to... So let's say that... how do I say this? Let's say that it's the year 1900, and I travel to the future, and I see the iPod, and then I just take one back with me. And then I bring it back to the year 1900, and I point it to everybody and see, ha, I created this. I didn't. And
Well, you technically did.
No, not at all.
Well, I mean, it depends.
You took
on
something from the
about
future that was
timeline,
already
right?
created and brought it back to the past and showed somebody.
Yeah,
Right.
this is plagiarizing. Your God is God in this
Yeah,
concept is plagiarizing. Yes.
My God is plagiarizing himself. That's what I mean. If you want to say
No,
that, he's
that's it.
himself
I
in the
can't take it
future.
anymore. No, goodbye, everybody. I'm actually doing it this time.
I'm just saying he could plagiarize him. I don't see how you can't. It's like kind of like a retcon ability, right? Like if you write something in a story, you can make something in the later on in the story and use it, retcon it, back into the previous part of the story, and then that was always true. Like every piece of
So-
fiction does that at certain times, right? Like a character didn't die.
The thing is with this argument is that you'd have to give me an experience where you're able to see into the future and then furnish your own mental content.
Well, I can't do that because I'm not eternal.
So it's irrational to think that God could do the same thing.
Why is it irrational to think that an eternal being who
It's
works
unjustified.
does it?
It's unjustified.
It's not a justified belief. So the way that my inductive argument works is that you'd have to give me an experience where you are able to furnish your mental content with anything exterior of yourself. And then also, if you're going to prove the notion that God can do this, you'd have to give me an experience or any amount of knowledge that you've actually have experienced where God can see into the future and furnish this mental content.
Why do I have to do that?
Then because my inductive argument works, and then it makes the idea of a God furnishing his mental content with anything exterior of itself completely irrational.
Why does that make it irrational? I mean, if we know that the human body can lift up to a certain amount of pounds, but no one has done that yet, that doesn't make it impossible for someone to lift that many pounds. That would make your inductive argument that humans can't lift that much correct, which would be wrong because we know people can lift.
How do you know that?
With science.
So do you not understand how inductive arguments work?
I'm just trying to understand how you're trying
let
to
me give you another inductive argument, okay? I experience only white swans. So therefore, all swans are white.
That's dumb.
Well, it's an inductive argument. It's based off an experience. So the only way that you could disprove my inductive argument of white swans is to show me a black swan or any swan of a different color.
Yeah,
so
saying that a swan of another color is possible is not really an argument. It certainly isn't evidence, and it doesn't disprove the claim.
Exactly.
I kind of get where you're coming from, but couldn't I use the same logic to be like, everything comes from something else that created it? Can you show me anything that was created from something?
Yeah, I have an inductive argument for that. It's great that you brought that up. So premise one is stuff comes from pre-existing stuff. Do you agree with that premise?
Yeah, I agree with that premise. I know these three permutations.
So is the universe made up of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. So the universe arose from pre-existing stuff.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so you don't need a creator God. The universe just arose from pre-existing stuff.
Right, and that stuff is God. That wouldn't break my argument. It would just support it.
God created everything exterior of itself, right? It's the mind.
Yeah, but you said God created the universe ex nihilo, which means God did not create the universe out of pre-existing stuff. God just furnished the universe out of absolutely nothing. He just willed it into existence.
Yeah, he just willed it into existence. He's the stuff.
Right. But my argument my inductive argument says that the universe arose from pre-existing stuff. So the only way to destroy my inductive argument is to give me an experience where you've seen something come from nothing.
Exactly. I mean, I couldn't be. Have you seen something that?
No, I haven't. So that's how my
has.
inductive argument works. So I've only seen stuff come from pre-existing stuff. So you would have, in order to prove an ex nihilo God is even possible, is to give me an experience where something came from nothing. Have you ever experienced something come from nothing?
Yeah, sure, an idea.
Well, an idea doesn't come from nothing. It comes from your brain.
Okay, but you'd have to show me something that proves that, there are new ideas that are created.
Yeah, and that comes from their brain. That comes from pre-existing stuff.
Okay. So this is such a strange argument. I don't even know how to rebuttal. It's so strange.
Yeah, because it's a strong, sound, inductive argument. So
no, it's not. It's not strong. It's just that I'm not seeing the logical incongruent. I'm not seeing where God being eternal no longer applies to this inductive argument.
Because the only way that an ex nihilo God works is that it furnished its universe through nothing, just purely of itself. Right?
No, well, he is something. You're presupposing that God is nothing. He is something.
Well, I'm just saying the universe came from pre-existing stuff.
Yeah, he is pre-existing because he's eternal. So he's created.
He's not stuff. And again, your argument is not that God made the universe out of something else. God just willed the universe into existence from nothing.
From himself, which is something.
That doesn't make any sense. Like if I go take a dump in the forest, mushrooms will grow out of it, and sure, some of the atoms from the stool sample will be in the mushrooms. But if you're going to say God created this universe out of himself, then that means that, like the poop mushrooms in the forest, there is some God particles in this can of Fanta, but nobody thinks that that's how anything works.
Well,
I don't
No,
think
I
you
think God
believe
particles
that.
are in that Fanta. I think
So,
that
Dort,
Fanta
are
is
you-
pretty godly.
So,
Because
Dort,
he
are you
created
arguing?
everything.
Hold on, Dort. Are you arguing the fact that God is a material, physical being?
No, he's not a material physical being.
Right. So
eternal.
how could he make us something from himself when he's not material?
Actually,
physical?
I take that back. He is a material physical being.
Right. So where can we see God?
Look up, look around you. That's all God.
In the face of a smiling child. Okay, well now we're just saying words, and I
No,
don't know.
well, okay. So for the Christian definition of God, right? He is eternal, omnipresent, omnipotent, and all powerful, right? In order to fit those, there can nothing be above you, right? So if a table exists, right, for God to exist, God would have to be that table, because he wouldn't be all powerful if he wasn't that table, right? So God is all
Are you
around
sure
you
you're a
and in
Christian, not a
everything.
pantheist?
No, I'm not a pantheist. I'm just saying
You
that
might
in order
be.
to fit the definition, you
I'm-
have to be everything. To
This
be
is-
all powerful, you have to be everything.
This
So
is
yeah, he's
what
part of
This is
everything.
what a pantheist believes.
No, this is not what this is what a logical.
That's literally what a pantheist believes, dude. I usually need to look at the definition of a pantheist.
I just don't see. I just don't see how it's like a not understandable argument that to be all powerful and omnipresent, you have to be everything and everywhere, right? Is that not true?
I mean, sure.
I don't know why that would be the case necessarily, but yeah, I mean, this is, I don't know. We're arguing like classical theism, and then you're saying things that are consistent with it, but then you just turn around and say like, oh, no, God is a physical thing and everything and everywhere, and this is a
classical.
conglomeration of beliefs that don't really work well together, and I don't think you can actually really defend them. It's just kind of incoherent.
How is it incoherent? I'm basically saying
Because you're mixing up classical theism with pantheism and other ideas.
No, because pantheism is multiple gods, right? I believe in one true
No,
God.
that's a
No,
pantheon.
that's
That's
polytheism.
a pantheon or polytheism. Pantheism is the belief that the universe and everything is God. So if I pick up a cup, that is a part of God. That's what a pantheist believes.
Well, I mean, how could anybody believe if you believe in the definition of Jesus and the Trinity as it is explained into the Bible? There is no way you couldn't think that, right? Because you have to be omnipresent, omnipotent. These are things that are congruent. Like these are
No.
right next to each other.
Because they usually
Okay.
say God is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. So if a God is,
What?
and you said that earlier, we asked you, is God stuff?
eternal.
And you said no. So, but then you said yes, because like I think you just kind of realized you have to say yes to stay consistent or something. But I don't know. I feel like
Oh, do you guys not know what eternal things are? They can exist and not exist at the same. Why are you binding?
Wait, hold
What?
on. Wait, they're what? Can you
Something-
repeat that?
Something can exist and not exist at the same time.
Hold on. Do you believe that a married bachelor can exist?
So, if they're not eternal, they can't.
Hold on. I'm going to re-ask my question. Do you think a married bachelor can exist?
If they're not eternal, they can't.
Can a married bachelor exist?
If they're not eternal, they can't.
So if they're eternal, let's say I have an eternal married bachelor, does that exist?
Yeah, because you can exist when
Oh my
he's
God.
married.
You're
and a bachelor.
rejecting the law of non-contradiction and the basis of all logic. That is a logical
I think-
contradiction.
How is that a logical contradiction? A
I
being can
think-
exist between.
It's a P and not P, dude. I don't know what to tell you.
I
You
think
know what a bachelor is?
maybe I shouldn't even do this, but what I think maybe he is trying to say is if God is eternal and timeless, then God is like I'm married, but I used to not be married. Now, if I was timeless, then I would simultaneously exist in my married and not married state at the same time.
Exactly.
But that doesn't make any sense.
How does that not make sense?
That's a P and not P.
How does that not make sense? Can you explain to me how that doesn't make sense? If you're timeless?
Hold on. Do you know what a bachelor is?
Yeah, I know what a bachelor is.
Okay, what is it?
A bachelor is someone who is about to be married.
No.
Well, no. They just aren't married.
Yeah.
They aren't married.
They aren't about to be, whatever.
No. A bachelor is somebody who is not married.
That's fine.
The idea is it doesn't matter if you're single, you're about to get married or whatever. Until you are married, you are a bachelor.
Okay.
So if you're saying that an internal thing can be both married and not married at the same time, that's a logical contradiction. That is a P and a not P.
Based on what? If the thing is
Based
that you
off of
guys are like,
classical
oh,
logic.
well, you guys are saying this isn't logically congruent. It's not logically congruent if you stay based on something that can only exist at one time, right? God is all
This
dimensional,
Mountain
right?
Dew, this is what you're saying. This Mountain Dew exists and also doesn't exist at the same time.
So
that's what you're saying.
Do you know about
If
quantum
it's
particles,
eternal.
right? Right? Sure. Do you know about quantum particles, right? Right.
Yes, I
Yep.
know
So-
about quantum particles.
Basically, what I'm saying, and please let me finish my argument, right, is that something that is not bound by time, that is not bound by space, can exist in two places at the same time if they have those properties. There is nothing wrong with that assessment. You guys can laugh and be like, oh, well, that's not logically congruent. Yeah, for you blokes, for me, that's not possible. You can't be a married bachelor and if you can only exist at one time, but someone who exists outside of time, right? Someone who exists in the fourth dimension, who is not bound by seconds, can be in two places at once. That's not logically incongruent. Let's say that, wait, let's break this down to something that we can possibly do to like break it down to something that would fit in your fiction, right? Let's say that there was some, like a time traveler who had a watch, right? That could take them back in time to the particular point where they're standing, right? If they press that watch, right, and in the transfer of them going into time, right, when they're transferring between the times, where are they? You could argue, and most people will argue, that they are at both places at the same time, right?
No.
That is not logically incongruent.
Nobody says that.
I've never heard
Why-
anybody say that, but also we
Why?
have no reason
Can you
to think
disprove
that time travel is possible, like at all.
It doesn't matter if it's time. I'm just breaking down the
Well,
concept.
it matters so
of a
much.
timeless being. Because you can be in two different places at once if you're timeless. Like I could exist a second ago and a second in the future and now. That's if I'm timeless, if I'm not bound by time. How does that not make sense?
I mean, well, how do I say this?
He's crazy.
No, I mean, just claiming it to be that way doesn't actually make, it's kind of like is God an actual parsimonious answer? No, just because it's a 3-letter word doesn't mean that it actually is simple. And just claiming that, like, you'd have to demonstrate to us that this actually is the way these things work. You're just declaring it.
Okay, so you agree that you can't disprove that something timeless can exist at 2 points.
You can't disprove that a leprechaun named Jeffy McGee created the whole universe.
Okay, so that basically puts the thing that something is timeless. Okay, so how can I prove that something is timeless? Timeless things already exist.
Prove it.
No, they don't.
The universe,
Prove it.
It's
the
what?
multiverse. You guys believe in
I
the
mean,
multiverse, right?
if the black universe idea is true, then perhaps that might mean that the flow of time or whatever is an illusion. But then the universe would have the properties of God, and so now all of a sudden God just isn't special.
I mean, yeah, sure, God isn't special. He created the thing that's timeless just like him, and he's not special. You guys are so hung up of trying to pin me to the traditional Christian ideologies, but I don't
That's not what we're
believe
doing at all.
in lunacy, right? I believe in science because God is science. He created science, right?
Okay,
So
well, what does that mean?
God is science, right? He created science. He is science, right? So when
Science
we try
isn't a
to-
noun.
Science is more of a phenomenon, yeah, right? So
Science is a Science is a method.
No,
What?
it's just
No,
something that
science.
people do. It's
Science is not a method.
it's also not.
Method.
It's
The scientific method is just a way that scientists explain the way to make a hypothesis
Do you
or
understand the scientific method is based off of logic, which is something that you're rejecting?
no, I'm not. What logic am I rejecting?
You're saying that a timeless being can be
Mhm.
both married and married at the same time.
And can you how is that not logical?
Oh my god, dude.
because it violates non-contradiction. And it kind of seemed like your explanation was, well, yeah, but God is beyond that.
Okay, so you said that it doesn't follow something. What would you said? It doesn't follow contradiction or whatever.
It
Um.
breaks the law of non-contradiction.
Okay, so why does the rule of non-contradiction? Why is that rule applicable to a timeless, eternal being?
Because otherwise the being could both exist and not exist at the same time.
So
And
you're telling me
so
that
it makes the entirety of your God thing entirely fundamentally incoherent.
okay, so you're saying that it can't happen. He's bound by it because if he's not bound by it, he's not bound by it. Like what?
No,
Like
he would be.
so
It would
you-
be illogical and incoherent
Based on what?
based on the definition, like the laws of logic.
Okay, how does it break the laws of logic? I'm trying to understand what is the main
Because-
problem with my statement.
Dort, if I walked up to you and I'm holding a rock and I'm saying this rock does not exist, and you can see the rock in my hand, you would say, no, that exists, you're holding the rock, right?
And if it's an illusion?
Are you going full solipsist right now?
No, I'm just saying if it's an illusion, what do I do then? Like that makes no sense to me.
Well, if it's an
When
illusion,
was logic based on personal experience?
that's not a problem for non-contradiction, because if it's an illusion, then he's lying. It isn't. It actually isn't a rock.
Okay, so but by my perspective, it would be like
Like if I say I'm a woman, that doesn't mean that I'm fine. That I'm the law of non-contradiction. I just proved that that's not how it works.
Like,
No, I'm not. I'm just not telling the truth.
But like, if I'm holding this rock and then I say it doesn't exist, and you're like, no, it does exist. I'm like, right, it doesn't exist and it exists at the same time. You'd probably call me an idiot.
okay,
right?
so that's fine for your argument, right? I wouldn't call you an idiot because that is technically possible if the rock was timeless, right? And let's move on, right? Because that your entire argument is based off of like what's logically that's not logical. Okay, so logic is based off of truth, right? You would both agree that logic is based off of truth. What is truth?
No, logic is not based off of truth. It's based off of
Logic isn't based off of truth. Then what is logic based off of?
logic is based off of what we experience in reality, and it's a fundamental language for us to understand what we're talking about.
Okay, so you're saying that
We use logic to come up with truth statements.
Okay.
If logic were based in truth, then we wouldn't need logic. All we would have to do is sit here and just say all we'd have to do is be able to sit here and say truth statements. Except we need to have a way to discern statements like I'm 1,000 feet tall from statements that aren't true, and logic to the rescue.
okay, so what makes logic? Like, can you explain to me the difference between logic and the truth? What's the fundamental difference?
Logic is how we get to truth.
Oh, okay. Logic is how we get to truth. So, what if your logic is flawed?
Then it's not true.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like you can make I can say all people named Dortsnort are emperor penguins. Your name is Dortsnort, therefore you are an emperor penguin. As a logical statement, it's an inductive logical statement. But it's not true. We have to do an actual investigation to discover if the premises are actually true.
Just because something logically follows does not mean it's part of reality.
Okay. So, all I would have to do to prove God to you is prove that he could logically exist, right?
No.
Then it would be true.
You'd have to support, just because I can make a logical argument of something that might possibly exist does not mean that it exists in reality. For instance, a
Brussels
unicorn.
teapot. Yeah.
Yeah, a unicorn can logically exist. We have a horse and we have things with horns, and we've seen things like a rhinoceros that has this shape of a kind of a horse, right? And that could logically follow that a unicorn could exist. But I would have to back that up with empirics to justify that belief. Just because it's something that's logically possible does not mean that it can exist in reality. You'd have to back it up with empirics.
So, how much empirics do you need for something to be true?
More than none.
Okay, so if I were to say that God is an eternal being and therefore he can exist at two places at once, and that's how time works. If a being is outside of time, they're not bound by time, then that would mean that logically, that's the truth. Right? I'm just following your line of logic.
Yeah, again, you can make a logical argument that's completely consistent. Like I can say all zip-zops are dippity-doos, and all dippity-doos are whatever, and then I have if A, B, and B, C, then A, C, or whatever. But that doesn't, like if I said that, then I would ask you to force, I'd be like, so, because I've structured this argument, you must concede that it is true. Now what I would hope you do is like, wait, what the hell? But what is a zippity zop? Like I have no prior experience with what that is, and it hasn't been defined. Again, just saying God is eternal. What does that mean? What do we have other than our imagination that we can pull to argue that makes any sense or that it's even possible or anything like that?
I see.
Jordan, the entirety of this time, you've been doing this, which is a logical fallacy. So it's called special pleading. It's applying standards, principles, and or rules to other people or circumstances while making oneself or certain circumstances exempt from the same critical criteria. Without providing adequate justification, special pleading is often a result of strong emotional beliefs that interfere with reason.
Okay, so what is adequate justification? Any justification?
Evidence.
Give us anything that we can relate to or pull on to. So like if you want to say something that's timeless and eternal or whatever, okay, give any example of anything that is like that in any way that we can compare. Otherwise, again, somebody can just do the zip zop dippity doo argument and argue that zip zop dippity doo exists.
Okay.
Because the entirety of this time, you've been special pleading saying that, well, God isn't bound to the same logical reasonings as we are in reality. Saying that God can exist in two places at the same time. He can both exist and not exist. But for me, I would not be able to exist and not exist at the same time. Because you're saying I'm not an eternal being. But an eternal being can do that. You're not giving adequate justification for that. You'd have to give me evidence or anything that's relatable to in reality of an eternal being that can do that.
So I'm just not understanding. All right. So I want you guys to educate me, right? Because obviously you guys think I'm illogical. I want you guys to educate me, right? So if I were to say, let's say that right now I can lift 150 pounds. If I make the argument that me, who was 2 times stronger, can lift 300 pounds, right? That would be special pleading, right? By your logic.
No.
Why? Because I would have to show you evidence.
No, that's something that logically follows. So you're just saying that if I lift 150 pounds now and I have double the strength, I would lift 300 pounds if I was double the strength. That just logically follows. That's not special pleading. Special pleading would be like me saying that in order to determine minds is based off of sense data, but then I also believe that a tree has a mind, but I'm not giving adequate justification. I'm just saying it has a mind because I think it has a mind, but I'm not using the same epistemological stance in order to determine that the tree has a mind or not having a mind.
Okay, here's the thing. I don't think I'm getting my argument across correctly. Much smarter people have probably presented this argument better than I have. So I will concede right now, and thank you for having me on, and I all that stuff. I will concede right now if you could prove to me that God doesn't logically follow if he was an eternal being, right? Let's presuppose that he is an eternal being. How would that not logically follow? Because if that is proven to me, fuck it. I'm going to throw away my Bible right now.
That might work, but we have no justification for claiming that God is eternal. You're just sort of saying, well, the only way for a universe to even make sense is if I resort to a first mover argument or whatever. That's what God would be, therefore God exists. But an argument doesn't prove anything.
That's the ontological argument for God, or tag. The problem with tag is that you're defining the God into existence without giving justification for the God to exist in the first place. And that's the issue.
The thing is that an eternal, for me, it logically follows that an eternal being has to create the universe, right? As we've already went through before, and I don't want to go through it again, right? So I'm not hearing, I'll concede if you give me a logical argument that the universe can exist without an unmoved mover,
yeah,
right? Without
infinite regress.
begging the question. Infinite regress? You believe in that?
Yeah.
Okay, so where does all that energy go?
Just infinitely in the past.
Oh, so you're telling me that energy is infinite, even though it cannot be created nor destroyed, it's just infinitely out there?
Well, it can be eternal.
Yeah.
I mean,
the energy can be finite, but it's just eternal.
Well, it can be infinite and be eternal too.
How can it be infinite and finite at the same time? That's not.
So let me give you
nobody said it was infinite and finite. We said it was infinite and eternal.
So let me give you an analogy, Dort. So if I'm on an infinite road, right? So on this infinite road, I can travel one way down the road and never reach the end. I can travel the other way up the road, never reach the end. If I start at my house that's on the road, can I travel 50 miles to my grandmother's house on an infinite road?
No, you cannot.
Why not? Can you not travel 50 miles?
No, you can. It's just an infinite road.
Right. So on an infinite road, I'm at one point and I'm traveling 50 miles to my grandmother's house. Can I get to my grandmother's house?
I suppose you can.
Right. Because the point of an infinite regress is that there's causes along that causal chain that goes infinitely in the past and will go infinitely in the future. It's just a causal chain. What that road is hasn't been determined. It could be time, it could be energy, that I don't know, but I believe in an infinite regress because all I have ever experienced is causes after causes after causes. So for me to exist, my mom had to exist, and etc., all the way down. That's an infinite regress. It's an infinite amount of causes to get to the now.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but infinite regress just sounds like you believe in something that's eternal.
Yeah.
But that thing isn't God. It's just
the universe can be eternal.
Universes. Okay, so the universe.
I just call it reality. Reality is eternal.
Okay, so reality is eternal. Wouldn't that be proof that something eternal can exist?
Yeah, the universe.
Okay.
Universe, reality.
Wouldn't that give credence to the fact that God can be eternal too? Wouldn't that be? Why?
No. Or
wait,
would it give credence
eternal,
to?
How come God can't be?
You can imagine that a God is eternal, but again, we do know that a universe exists, and we don't know that a God exists.
But you said it was logic. You said it was illogical that I thought an eternal being could exist.
No, it was an eternal being existing outside of space and time was illogical because you were giving parts of God where he could both exist and not exist, or he could be a married bachelor and not, like he could be a married bachelor.
Yeah.
That's illogical.
Look, guys, I have to move on to the next thing because this has just gone on for far too long.